Hey guys, what's up? It's the Tominator, and yes, as I'm sure you probably guessed from the title, this is going to be a pretty negative video. We're not going to hold much back here as I vent and deliver a rather blunt and scathing critique of the 2019 Mr. Olympia and the Olympia contest at large. So fair warning right now to all the sensitive snowflakes out there. If you're easily offended and can't stomach criticism, best to turn away at this point before you become too agitated. Maybe wait till the next video comes out because there I'll go over some of the more pleasant surprises, few and far between as those might have been. But for all the realists out there like myself who are honest enough to admit that this year's Olympia was something of a stinker, then stick around and let's have some fun. Maybe go cook up some potatoes and gravy to go along with this big juicy roast I've prepared. Alright, for starters, as I already mentioned in previous videos, and this is something I'm sure just about all of you would agree, the lighting was a straight up abomination this year. The Olympia organizers should be absolutely ashamed of themselves for presenting all these world-class bodybuilders under such piss-poor lighting conditions. I mean, you've been doing this shit for 55 years now, correct? And for the past several occasions at this exact same venue, Orleans Arena in Las Vegas. How hard is it to figure out how to put together a standardized background with some decent stage lighting that properly showcases muscular definition? Get your act together already, jeez, man. It was way too dark and dull. So many details were getting completely washed out, especially on the darker skinned competitors, which, let's be honest, is over half the lineup these days. Not to mention that the busy, multicolored backgrounds were distracting and unfairly highlighted certain individuals while obscuring others depending on where these guys were standing. Mr. Olympia Brandon Curry himself looks like he's about to be swallowed up by a friggin' black hole here, for Christ's sake. I really hope management took notice and fired some people afterwards. And let's not forget about that amazingly, what's the word for it? Artistic camera work, let's just call it. I mean, who didn't just love all the shifting angles and constant panning around? My favorite is when they film the contestants from the side and even behind. How creative. I mean, let's face it, head-on shots where we can properly view full-body comparisons are just so predictable and played out these days. Okay, let's cut the crap. Obviously, that was sarcasm, guys. But seriously, what is this, amateur hour? Did the film crew have attention deficit disorder or something? It's downright infuriating as a fan when you're trying to judge this thing and you miss out on entire poses due to all this unnecessary flitting around. But then again, that complaint holds true for pretty much every year, doesn't it? And while the lighting situation was particularly egregious this time around, truth be told, it's been pretty bad for the past 5 years or so at least. So these problems are nothing new or unique to this show per se. What was new this year was the incredibly shallow talent pool on hand, as many of the top open-class competitors were sidelined for one reason or another. You had former 7-time champ Phil Heath electing to sit this one out as he takes a lengthy hiatus recovering from stomach surgery. You had Big Ramy missing the chance to even qualify because of an ill-timed shoulder injury several months ago. Nathan DeAsha was forced to pull out at the last minute for legal reasons. And Josh Lenardowitz also opted to skip this one due to some personal health concerns. Hell, even the reigning Mr. Olympia, Sean Roden, was prematurely banned by Olympia owners for an alleged rape accusation back in the summer, for which he hasn't even been confirmed guilty as of yet. It's unprecedented, and just ridiculous in my opinion. Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? So anyway, 4 out of the top 8, or literally 50% of the top 8 finalists from last year, were absent for one reason or another. What we were left with was a depth of field more analogous to the Arnold Classic than your typical Mr. Olympia. So it was easily one of the weakest lineups in decades. Yep, the open division was depleted alright, and boy oh boy did it show. The worst part was not even that so many big names were missing, it was that the guys who did show up, almost to a man, failed to rise up to the occasion and fill those shoes. With a couple of notable exceptions in the form of Hadi Choopan and Patrick Moore, nobody really delivered the goods. I think it's safe to say that none of these guys brought their personal best. They all looked off to varying degrees, even the ultimate winner in Brandon Curry, who, it has to be said, was sharper at the Arnold earlier in the year. Runner-up William Bonac was also much better back in March compared to this version here, where he looked surprisingly small and flat. Dexter was better than last year, to be fair, but his midsection was still faded, the legs looked down again, and it's clear his best days are well behind him. Luke Sando was a total bust considering all the promise and potential he showed at the Arnold, Ohio. It remains a mystery to me how Steve Kuklo managed to land in that top 6 at all, given that he lacks any visible separation and is subpar from the back. Cedric was disappointing as always come September. Not much more to say there, other than I've simply lost hope. Juan Morel looked horrible next to those crazy Instagram pics he was uploading just days before the show. But probably nobody was a bigger disappointment than Rolly Winkler. There's a reason I put him in the thumbnail, folks. Now look, Rolly was okay, don't get me wrong. He was respectable in his own right and still had some amazing poses and attributes. But after all the hype built up from 2018 with his 3rd place finish and winning the People's Champ Award and all that, many people had him pegged as a heavy favorite to win it all this year. The bar was raised, and Rolly failed to meet it, plain and simple. Even if you're a Rolly fan, hell, especially if you're a Rolly fan, you gotta be pretty disappointed with how he did here. I mean, how many of us would have predicted he'd wind up as low as 5th a week or two ago? Probably no one outside of a few biased haters. And I know some apologists are about to come crying about how Rolly apparently injured his hamstring, or whatever leading up to the show, blah blah blah. Okay, and Bonac apparently sustained a leg injury as well and still managed to crack top 2 with asymmetrical thighs, so no excuses. The bottom line is that expectations were through the roof and the beast fell well short. Now look, I'm a big fan of Rolly, and I'm a big fan of Brandon. Go watch some of my old videos from 2016 and 2017, and you'll see I was one of the first people openly championing these guys and claiming they deserved higher placings. But the fact of the matter is that neither one of them really nailed their conditioning here. And as good as Brandon looked, I don't think his physique was Mr. Olympia caliber, straight up. He was far too smooth and lacking in separation, especially through the quads, which were, frankly, barely top 6 material. In any other year, Curry probably would have finished no higher than 3rd with this physique. He was simply lacking that refined polish and level of detail we've come to expect from a modern-day Olympia champion. All in all, this was probably the most off the winner has looked since Jay Cutler in 07. Now, I will say this, though. I think he still probably deserved it, although a strong case can certainly be made for Hattie in first as well. But that just goes to show what a lackluster lineup it truly was. So yeah, the open class was a bit of a letdown this year, to put it mildly. There's no two ways about it. Finally, my last complaint is again targeted towards something a bit more general, as it doesn't just apply to only this year. But can they please, for the love of God, stop force-feeding us all these women's events? Like seriously, Friday night prejudging was a brutal slog. We had to wait over 2 hours in before they finally got around to the men's stuff. Now look, I'm all for equality and the women can have their place too, but how about telling us at what time each event is going to start? Wouldn't that be a logical idea? It's no secret that well over 90% of the bodybuilding fan base is male, and the vast majority of us don't really care to watch bikini or figure or fitness. Now, it's cool if you do, but recognize that you're in the minority. Even the commentators were mentioning how they barely followed it and didn't really understand how it was judged, so I know I'm not alone in this. I think it's a safe bet that most people, myself included, would have much rather preferred to watch the 212 or Classic Physique prejudging, which were not even live streamed because they took place earlier on in the day. Like I said in my Instagram post, and yes, I do have Instagram now, though only about 1/100th of you subscribers follow me on there. But like I said on there, this is not what we were waiting to see, okay? This is not what jumps to mind when you think of the Mr. Olympia, the quote-unquote Super Bowl of bodybuilding, and all the eager anticipation and excitement that goes along with it. Here's an analogy for you. Imagine buying tickets to an NBA game, or any other professional sport you enjoy. And they tell you the game starts at 7, but really, when you arrive there, turns out it's a WNBA, i.e. women's game, and you have to sit through that for 2+ hours before the real game starts. You'd be pissed. People would riot. Because that's not what you paid for. That's not what you came to see. Now, granted, the online webcast is free, so it's not as bad. But speaking as someone who attended the event in person last year, who flew out to Vegas for the weekend and spent a couple $100s on 2 tickets for both Friday and Saturday night, let me tell you, it was absolutely painful having to sit through several hours of this boring crap. Bottom line is that these events should be scheduled separately. Let them rise or fall on their own merits instead of piggybacking off the popularity of the men's divisions. Fitness, bikini, figure, women's physique, These things are decidedly not bodybuilding and shouldn't be lumped in with it for the sake of political correctness and appeasing a tiny minority of the worldwide viewership. Not only that, but they also announced the return of women's bodybuilding next year as well, as if we needed another female category. They already have 4, the same as the men, and now they're going to add a 5th? How the hell can there be more female than male divisions? In what world does that make any sense? If the men have 4, the women should have like 2, 3 at most. But anyway, guys, that's just my 2 cents. Sorry for ranting, but I felt the need to complain a little given that this was probably the worst Mr. Olympia I can ever recall seeing, at least since I've been following it closely from around 2005. Certainly it pales in comparison to any of the early 2000s or 90s contests as well. Once again, like I said at the beginning, this video was designed to be negative. So if it seems overly cynical and glass half empty, that's the reason. I'm not some blind hater, believe it or not, just a passionate fan with a vested interest in the sport. So I want them to see their mistakes and learn to correct them going forward. Hopefully The Rock's new show will kick some ass and show them how it's done. And on that note, next time we'll speak a little bit about the positives to be found in this past weekend, okay? Until then, this has been the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back!